Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 21 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Great to have you along on the show today. My name is Jason Romano, and as always, you can subscribe, you can listen, you can download everywhere podcasts are available here on the program on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and definitely leave a review for us on iTunes. Let us know how we're doing on the program. All of our content, show notes, our favorite quotes, everything you want to know about the podcast is also available at sportsspectrum.com. Today's guest is Major League Baseball umpire Ted Barrett. Now, he became a full-time Major League Baseball umpire in 1999, but he has got a pretty amazing story. He's also an ordained minister. He's the co-founder of Calling for Christ Ministry, which is a professional umpire ministry. You wouldn't think that in the sports world that umpires would actually have a ministry, but they do, and Ted Barrett is at the forefront of that. He's the one that co-founded it. He's also a married man with 3 kids, and his own son is following in his footsteps as a professional baseball umpire. Ted is the only umpire to ever be behind the plate for 2 perfect games. David Cone back in 1999 with the Yankees, and Matt Cain with the San Francisco Giants in 2012. Ted Barrett has a heart for people. He's got a heart for the Lord. I think this will take you a little bit behind the curtain, a little peek behind what really goes on in an umpire's life. It is not a glamorous life, but the Major League Baseball umpire community is a tight-knit community, and they go strong for about 7-8 months out of the year, traveling pretty much twice a week. It's an insane travel schedule, but we're happy to have Ted Barrett here on the podcast. So take a listen. This is episode number 21 with Major League Baseball umpire Ted Barrett. Ted, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here, Ted, on the podcast. And we're almost halfway through the 2017 MLB season. I guess we'll start there. And just how's it been going so far this year for you?
Oh, 2017 season's been great. I've been lucky. We've hit a lot of good weather. I've got a great crew. And so yeah, we've had a great first half.
Now, what do you characterize as like a good or a great first half as an umpire? How are you judged?
Well, really, so on the field, I guess it would just be our general performance, the way things have rolled along, having games and when situations arise, handling them, and that's happened. But for me also, ministry-wise, it's been a great time to be with my crew. You know, you have to understand as crewmates, there's 4 of us at the major league level, and of course 2 at the low minor league level, and 3 in AA and AAA. It's like a marriage because you're just constantly with each other. I mean, you're staying in hotels together, you're going to work together, you're commuting back and forth, you're spending your off time, you're going to lunch, you're going to movies, and so it's just if you've got good partners, that's what makes up a good crew, and that's what I have.
That's awesome. Is there more downtime than one would think as an umpire, as far as just what a day is like when you wake up and then your game is not until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night? Is there a lot more downtime than the sort of average fan would think there is?
Well, yeah, because the average game is a little over 3 hours, so there is a lot of downtime. But actually, it's the travel is so intense. I think the average fan would be shocked if they looked at our schedule and they saw we're on a plane every 3 days. And many times after a day game on getaway day, we're able to get out, get to the next city. But many times it's night games, and then we get up at the crack of dawn the next day, and we'll fly the majority of the day and then get in and work a 7 o'clock game. So it's funny because sometimes I might have a 4 a.m. wake-up call. Now it's 11 p.m. and I'm in extra innings. I've got to be mentally sharp, and so it's difficult. And as I get older, I'm not a young man anymore. Crisscrossing time zones and losing sleep. We end up catching up a lot on sleep, and we have to be able to sleep on the plane and take naps. And so it's a lot of the downtime is rest, but also there's time in the locker room. We get to the ballpark about an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game, and we'll just spend time together and as we prepare and get ready for. There's time in the locker room before the game and after the game, as we decompress, and we like to go to the gym. We're a healthier crew, and so we'll eat lunch together, and so there's a lot of interaction, not just on the field.
Do you ever get any time off during the season?
We do. We're lucky. We get 4 1-week breaks. Now, 3 of those we will take together as a crew where we all go. And then there's our 4th break is we call them block breaks. So a AAA umpire will come in and work with us for 4 weeks, and we'll take turns going out 1 week at a time. And that's really without those, we'd leave home and never see our family. You know, a lot of fans have to remember that the players, they're home half the time, or at least what is their home for the season. And so they've got their wives and their families in that home, and then they'll be on the road for half the season. We're on the road for the entire 26-week season, plus spring training and postseason, unless you happen to live in a town like I do here in Phoenix, and we have 2 series scheduled here in Phoenix, which we've already worked. So I won't get back home to work until next season.
Mm. We're talking to Ted Barrett here, Major League Baseball umpire on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Ted, I want to talk about your faith in Jesus Christ. I want to go back to where that moment kind of started for you when you made Christ when you made Christ Lord of your life. Take us back to that moment when it all started for you.
Yeah, I was 8 years old. I grew up in a small town outside of Buffalo, North Tonawanda, New York. Very proud to be from there. And I was 8 years old. I went to a fundamental Baptist church. And I walked forward. I was the first one in my family to do that. Grew up before that, really no church, no background. My dad's brother, my Uncle Jack, was a small church, and he was the music pastor / bus driver / greeter. And I just remember him constantly inviting my dad to church, and said, "Bring the family, come to church." And my dad would say, "No, thank you, no, thank you." Finally, one Easter, we did. And I just remember hearing the gospel laid out and knowing that I needed a savior. I knew that I didn't understand theologically everything that was going on at 8 years old, but I knew I needed Jesus. And I remember responding to that and praying for that, and then walking in front of the church, and later being baptized, and my whole family did. And but like most people's journeys, that's not where it ended. As we moved to California when I was in high school, and we got out there and we said, we'll find a new church, but we never did. And I was playing sports, football, basketball, baseball, boxing, everything. So Sunday, I didn't miss going to church. I was sleeping in, and that was my day off. It wasn't until I got into college. I played football at Cal State Hayward, which is Cal State East Bay now, Division II school out in California. And the chaplain, I went to chapel before the games because I thought it was a good luck thing probably. And then, I went back, and if I did well, I went back the next week. And the chaplain there was with a group called Campus Crusade for Christ, which is Crew now. And he invited me to lunch one day, and he knew that was the way to get me there. If you buy me lunch, I'm in. So we would meet every week. And he just began to disciple me without me even knowing it. And then we started doing Bible study. And then so that was something that drew me back to God. And as I got married and I got into the minor leagues and started a family, my wife and I got plugged into an excellent church, and then we were part of a church plant. And so that's really how my faith journey began, and then got reinvigorated when I was in college.
That's awesome. Now, when did you decide that you wanted to become, you mentioned you played football in college, and then you end up as a baseball umpire. So when did that happen, when you decided you wanted to kind of pursue this as a vocation and go into becoming an umpire in baseball?
Well, while I was playing in college, I was umpiring high school baseball and umpiring American Legion and things like that. And it paid really well at the time. I think I made $46 a game, which was, way back then was still a lot of money, but it was a lot. And the guys I played with were, flipping burgers and working other jobs that they hated. And I was getting paid to go out and be in the sunshine and umpire baseball. And so I actually met some guys that were in the minor leagues through that, and they encouraged me to go to umpire school and give it a shot as a profession. And I was actually boxing at the time that I went to umpire school, and living in Las Vegas, and I worked as a sparring partner. And my dad never really liked me boxing, and so he said, "Hey, I'll pay for you to go to umpire school." And I thought it would be a nice little break from getting my head knocked in around the ring. And so I went not really wanting to pursue a career, but I got selected out of there and got sent to the minor leagues. And before I knew it, I had worked my way up the ladder and I was in the major leagues. So,
Cool.
It's just a twist and turn that God takes us on.
Absolutely. Now, take me through the process of being selected to the minor leagues. How does that work? Do you apply, or do you put your name in a hat or kind of submit a resume and then they look and pick? Or how does that work just to even get called to the minor leagues? And then we'll talk about the minor league journey in a minute.
So umpire school really is kind of like a big tryout. There's 2 umpire schools right now. I went to a different school that does no longer exist. I went to the Joe Brinkman Umpire School in Cocoa, Florida. But now there's the Harry Wendelstedt Umpire School in Daytona Beach and the Umpire School in Vero Beach, both in Florida. And about 150 to 200 guys go every year. So you got about 300 to 400 guys attending every season. And out of that, they take about the top 20 to 25 out of each school. And then they're sent to a different camp, which is run by minor league baseball. So now out of those 50 guys, they're going to take what's needed that year. And sometimes there's 15 openings, sometimes there's 30, sometimes all 50 get placed, and they get placed into the minor leagues. So that's how you get in. And so the odds of getting into the bottom level of the minor leagues are really tough.
Now, obviously, much like baseball players, umpires sort of have to pay their dues in the minor leagues as well. So take us through that journey for you through the minor leagues as an umpire and how long you were there, what it was like. I'm sure it wasn't this glamorous life. So take us through sort of the time when you were paying your dues in the minors.
Yeah, well, when I went through the minor leagues, it was similar to what it is now. You have to remember that the players, you might get a prospect that's placed into A ball, and then he's a couple years away from being in the big leagues. I had the San Diego Padres the other day, and I noticed they had several players that were in A ball last year. That doesn't happen with umpiring. You start at the bottom level, at the rookie ball level, and you have to spend time at each level. So you have to go from rookie ball to short season to mid A to long A to double A to triple A, and you cannot skip a level. So it's several years. The average time is 10 years. Sometimes there's guys that worked 14, 15 years before they get hired into the major leagues. Now for me, I went through each level pretty rapidly, and I got called up into the major leagues my 6th year, but then you're still not full time. You work vacations, injuries, and then I wasn't hired until full time until my 11th season. So I paid my dues there. It is not glamorous, very much underpaid at the minor league level. At the major league level, we're blessed that we make a good salary, but the minor league level, it is barely scraping by. You're staying, especially at the low levels, you're staying at in small towns with kind of not the nice hotels, not the 4-star hotels, but you're staying at the motor inns.
Right.
You drive your car from one city to the next, and they're long drives. There's not many days off. We have a nice spread in our locker room in the big leagues before the game and after the game. You're lucky to get a cold hamburger or a cold slice of pizza after a game, and then in these small towns, there's not much open to go eat after, and so it's a tough existence, and you get no breaks like we do in the big leagues. So you leave home for spring training and you don't come back until September. It's hard on a family with the guys that have wives and children, and so it's really a hard existence at the minor leagues. But of course, everybody's just striving, trying to get that job in the major leagues. And at the major leagues, we don't leave until we die or retire, and so there aren't that many openings. You're lucky to have one a season, and sometimes there's many years there's none. So you're down there at the minor leagues trying to maybe be that one guy out of your class of 300 people that you started out with. Maybe you'll be the one guy to make it to the major leagues.
Because it's so hard to make it, do you see a lot of guys sort of fizzle out or just kind of be like, maybe I'm just going to go get a regular job or something because it becomes so difficult to grind? It just sounds brutal in some ways.
Yeah, it sure is. And again, the people with families that just say, I'm tired of being away from my family. I'm going to go get a real job where I can work a 9 to 5. Also, guys at the minor league level, the supervisory staff is pretty honest with them. They'll rank them, and so maybe a guy sees, I'm ranked really low, and I'm probably not going to make it to the big leagues, so I'm going to get out. And so some guys do quit on their own. Also, at each level, if you don't advance within a certain amount of time, you're released. So there's that turnover, and then that makes room for new guys coming in. So yeah, it's really tough. You're definitely not doing it to make a living. You're doing it to try to get to the major league level where you can make a living. It's very difficult. The smart guys, they take classes online, which, that wasn't available when I was in the minor leagues. So the tough thing is you might spend 10 years in the minor leagues and get out. If you've got no college background, if you've got nothing going for you, you're really starting over from scratch. So I always emphasize to the guys to get a college degree before you go in. Then you have something to fall back on, or at least take advantage of the technology that's available in online classes and things like that and get your degree so you have something going for you when you get out, because there's no pension. You're not going to have any money saved because you didn't make any money. And so you've got to plan for your future.
Take us back, Ted, to the first game you ever umpired in the major leagues. Do you remember the date and who played and all that? Can you give us some details on that?
Yeah, obviously it was a special day etched in my mind. I was in AAA at the time, and I remember I was working the Tucson Toros. There were no cell phones back then. My wife had driven down from the Phoenix area with our 2 young children at the time. I have 3 now. And there was a message in the hotel room for me to call Marty Springstead, who was the director of American League Umpires at the time. Back then, the staffs were separated. American League and National League were together now, but the staffs were separate at that time. And he called. He had left a message. I called him back, and he said, "I need you in Texas on Friday." And I was every emotion you could think of. Happy, anxious, nervous. I kept having this overwhelming feeling that he called the wrong guy. And
what year was this, Ted?
This was 1994, and it was May 27th, I believe, was the first game. And so I got on a plane to Texas, and I got in, and it was the Boston Red Sox were playing the Texas Rangers. The park was brand new there in Arlington, this beautiful stadium I pulled up to. It was nothing like the minor league parks I had worked in. That first game, Roger Clemens was pitching for the Red Sox, and I remember it rained like you people that live in Texas know what I'm talking about. I thought they were going to build an ark and have to put some animals on, and I thought if this was the minor league, we wouldn't play for a week. But that field drained, and we had about an hour delay, and we went back out and played again. And I just remember standing at third base saying, this is awesome, but at some point they're going to figure out they called the wrong guy, and then they're going to send the right guy in there. But I worked that series, and then I went to Yankee Stadium. It was Memorial Day, and that was my first plate job, and it was the Chicago White Sox against the New York Yankees. And Jim Abbott was the starting pitcher for the Yankees, and Scott Sanderson for the White Sox. And I'll just never forget it. It was very cool. And I was able to stay up that whole season until, if you remember, that was the strike year.
Yes.
And so the players went on strike, and I went back to AAA at that point. And that started my journey of going up and down into the major leagues. And I would spend some time in the big leagues filling in, and then back to AAA when I wasn't needed until I was hired full time.
That's awesome. I love that story. And I love that you remember it. You have this sort of, picture perfect memory of Roger Clemens and Jim Abbott and Arlington, Texas and Yankee Stadium. That's such a cool, gotta be a cool thing. Do you have any anything from those 2 series that you might have kept, like a baseball or something from that time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And after my first plate job, Buck Showalter was the manager of the Yankees, and he gave me the lineup that they keep on the dugout. Keeps taped up there, where the bench coach keeps track of the changes in the lineup, and he gave me that, and I've got that, and I've got I think I've got the lineup, the program from the day, and things like that I'll keep and show my grandkids one day and reminisce. But yeah, it's definitely burned into my mind and and something I won't forget.
Now, you said you became a full-time umpire in 1999. How does that process work? Is this the same thing? You get a call from somebody in the majors and they say, "Hey, it's time. We're going to do it," or do you kind of have to go through another process just to go through the minors for a few more years until that call comes?
Yeah, really, it's with the openings, and at the time there were some guys that had retired, and 3 guys that retired, and Marty Springstead said, name the 3 AAA guys. He said, you guys will be on the staff full time now. About the middle of that season, we had some turmoil in our union. There was a resignation strategy that failed, and it was a little bit of a mess. But when the smoke cleared, they honored the 3 of us that they said they were going to hire. They did hire, and it was a tough time in the umpiring profession. But God had His hand in all of that, and it's all worked out.
Your first year as a full-time Major League Baseball umpire, you actually get to call a perfect game at Yankee Stadium. I want to go back to that moment. I believe it was in July of 1999. What do you remember about that game and being behind the plate for such a historic moment?
Yeah, again, I've got vivid memories of that. We went to the ballpark that day, and we got there, and the game started. I remember it was just a hot, humid day. David Cohn was pitching. The Montreal Expos it was an interleague game, and no one actually in that lineup had ever faced David Cohn. And David Cohn had a tremendous slider, especially a backdoor slider. He'd throw to left-handers, and it looked like it was a foot outside. It would break right over the plate, and he had it going that day. Interesting thing, after the 3rd inning, we had a rain delay. We had a stoppage. Just a New York thunderstorm popped up. It's too heavy to play. We pulled the tarp, and usually that means that the starting pitcher's done. And I remember joking in the locker room saying, hey, we can't call the game. He's got a perfect game going. And we went back out there, and Cohn came back out, and he continued to pitch. It was a brief delay, and continued to baffle the hitters. And as it got closer, it was fun to watch. And then as it ended, I knew he had faced the minimum. I couldn't remember if there was a walk or an error. I knew it was a no-hitter because I looked at the board. But when I got in the locker room, I had to ask, was that a perfect game? And they said yes. So just to think about that, to think that to be a part of history was really an honor.
Yeah, at Yankee Stadium too, like the most historical ballpark, where legends played, and you get to call a perfect game there. That's pretty awesome. And then you get to call a second perfect game. Now, I read you're the only umpire ever to be behind the plate for 2 perfect games, and you got Matt Cain in 2012. Take us there.
Yeah, pretty amazing. 13 years later, and there it is again. And Cain against the Houston Astros, and he just really had his location going, hitting his spots. Getting some nice defensive plays behind him. And unlike, I wasn't exactly sure it was a perfect game the first time. Now, after about the 4th inning, I knew in my mind he had a perfect game going. And, you just sit back, and now I think my previous experience helped me because it's just, hey, concentrate, take one pitch at a time. And I did. And the last out was made, and I just, we got in the locker room, we all huddled up and prayed because, it's like God allowed us to experience that. And for me, to experience lightning in a bottle twice was pretty amazing. And then earlier that year, I was at third base when the Chicago White Sox, I believe, Philip Humber, I believe, threw a perfect game against the Mariners. So that kind of came in batches. So just to be, I think I'm one of the only people to be on the field actually for 3 perfect games. So you think about all the years that baseball's been played.
Yeah.
And to be a part of that fabric of history, it's really an honor. It's really cool to be a part of that.
Well, I know if I'm a major league pitcher, I want Ted Barrett at this game because there's a chance there might be a perfect game. That's for sure. All right, let me ask you this: as an umpire for a perfect game, and you talk about the pressure from a pitcher throwing strikes, making the right pitch, not allowing a hit. Are you feeling that too? You kind of alluded to that a little bit, but are you feeling pressure to get the call right? Don't botch this. Don't make that, mistake of just not, losing your focus or whatever. Like there's pressure on you too, I got to imagine, right?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of pressure because if you think about it, if you call a pitch off the plate, they're going to say, see, he helped the pitcher out. He didn't really earn this perfect game.
Right.
And the opposite thing could happen if you call a pitch, you miss a pitch, maybe it was a strike, and you call it a ball, and now it's ball 4. It's like you cost this guy a perfect game. That's something an umpire doesn't want to live with. And we look back at the Jim Joyce play at first base before replay. When Galarraga had a perfect game going, he calls the guy safe.
Yeah.
Replays show that he should have been called out. And now he's got to live with the fact that he cost the guy a perfect game. That's definitely, you're aware of that on the field, and you're saying, don't be a part of the story. Just let the pitcher do his thing and let him earn his perfect game or not earn his perfect game. But we just don't want to be a part of the story. So it's definitely a tremendous amount of pressure, but also there's pressure in every game, because it's just, with the media coverage and the scrutiny is so high, and they're so quick to point out every mistake we make or everything that they think is a mistake. It's just a tremendous amount of pressure night in and night out.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of your postseason games that you've umpired in a minute. But I just want to ask, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen in a game in which you were an umpire?
Oh gosh, I'd have to think about that for a minute. There's lots of things, whether it's.
Is there a story of something strange that happened? Not even be a minor league game, or just I don't know, some call that you made, whatever it might be.
Well, 2 quick things. One was I was working second base, and Tim McClellan had the plate one day in Chicago at Wrigley Field, and Sammy Sosa hit a ground ball where his bat was broken, and Tim called me in. He was holding the bat, and I could see there was cork in his bat, and so that was
I remember that game. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the first really time I'd seen a guy with a doctored bat like that, with the evidence right in front of us.
And what do you do at that moment? Can you just elaborate on that for a second? Just being a part of that. Like, are you supposed to? How do you report that to somebody? What do you do from there?
Well, the rules are spelled out. Using an illegal bat, the batter's out, we had to send the runners back. So you nullify his. He had a ground ball where the runners advanced, so he was out anyway. But we had to send the runners back, and then he's ejected from the game.
Okay.
And then you get ready for the media firestorm because it was on the heels of it was the early 2000s, 2003, I believe. So Sosa had. Him and McGuire had been chasing home run marks from that point. So You knew there would be a whole lot of that would be a huge media story. But for in the meantime, then you have to take the bat into the locker room. And if you remember, Albert Bell had a bat that was taken in the umpire locker room that someone broke in and stole it. So we had to send an umpire in to hide this bat in Wrigley Field.
I do remember that.
And he actually missed the half inning. We started the game without him as he was in there hiding it up in a remote part of our Wrigley Field locker room. And so that was, and then on a humorous note, I remember I was in the California League in High Desert, Adelanto, California, and we actually had a coyote delay as I saw the left fielder sprinting in, and he's calling time, and I said, what's his problem? And there was a coyote out on the field, and the left fielder was a guy named Matt Miske, who ended up playing in the big leagues, a great guy. But he felt like a coyote was chasing him, and then you look out, and there he was. In the fall league, we've had rattlesnakes on the field. Spring training a couple years ago, we had a bee delay as we had to wait for the swarm of bees to leave the stadium.
I remember that, and then I remember there was a game in the postseason. I don't think you were involved in it, where I remember Jabba Chamberlain against the Indians, where he had like a gnat. Like infestation of gnats just taking over him, and there wasn't really a delay. You just kind of had to play through it. But it's funny to think like animals, like a coyote delay. What is that?
Yes, and earlier this year, even in Miami, I was on the field, and we had a cat run on the field, and he made his way up the wall. And it's sometimes it just amazes me with doing a game in Toronto inside a dome, and there's a bird. It's like, how did he get in here?
Well, how does a cat get in a stadium? Like, who's bringing a cat to the ballpark and like letting it loose? I think of things like that. How does it even happen?
Right, and especially in a closed stadium. It's one thing of in the minor leagues in back then in High Desert, it was a pretty remote area, so I could see the coyote wandering in. But inside a dome stadium where everybody's checking everybody's bags as they come in. How'd that cat get in here?
Oh, exactly.
Maybe as a grounds crew has a pet, or they get him to chase the mice away. Who knows? But it is funny how they can get on the field and delay things.
A couple more minutes here with Ted Barrett, Major League Baseball umpire. Now, you've umpired two, as I did my research, of the most memorable World Series we've seen, especially in recent years. The 2011 World Series, where the Cardinals beat the Rangers in 7 games in that incredible comeback in Game 6, and the 2014 World Series, and the Giants beat the Royals in 7 games, and it came right down to the end there, and Bumgarner just was awesome and dominant in leading the Giants to the World Series. And 2007 was your other World Series appearance and your first time as an ump in the Fall Classic. What was it like, Ted, the first time you stepped on the field as an umpire in the World Series? I mean, this is a different level now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that I noticed is when I walk out on the field, as I do every night, and I'll look out at the out of town scoreboard and see the other games going on, and I want to pray for the guys on the field. And we think about, hey, we've got a difficult job here, but we got brothers out there working also. And I remember walking out on the field, and Chuck Merriweather said, hey, look at the scoreboard. And I looked out and I said, look at what? He goes, just look. And I said, there's nothing on there. And he said, exactly. He said, we're the only game in town. Mm-hmm. And that didn't make me feel any better. I was like, got even more nervous. So you think about the millions of people that are watching. And so there's a lot of pressure, but it's also like, this is really cool. This is what we work for. This is kind of the pinnacle of our career to get a World Series. And so it's an awesome thing to be a part of it. There's a whole lot going on, but it's also something that I learned in my walk with Jesus is that this is something that I worked so hard to get. And I remember I worked the plate in Colorado, Game 3 of that 2007 World Series. And when the game was over, I expected, I don't know, the sky to open up and trumpets to sound or the credits to roll of my movie, and there'd be a soundtrack and everybody would be, crying and happy. But it was nothing. The game was over. I felt, a sense of accomplishment. But there was this kind of sadness in me because I thought, so many of my colleagues worked so hard to get a World Series, and it's just another game as far as, in the big picture. And, I went in and took a shower and when the series was over, I came home and my wife said, hey, take out the garbage and pick up the dog poop in the backyard. It's piled up since you've been gone. And I'm like, well, I'm a World Series umpire, but, I'm still got to do that. So, my point is, it was a big thing for me that God showed me that, you can strive for things in this world and you can achieve things, but they really don't add up to anything eternally. And so the only thing that matters is our relationship with Jesus. And that's the important thing. And everything else, even something as great as being the plate umpire in a World Series, doesn't matter in comparison in our relationship with Jesus. And so I try to stress that to guys because I see guys and I see athletes, they want that ring. When I watch the NBA, I enjoy watching pro sports, and you see the guys talk about, I don't have a ring, and this great player should have had a ring. But you know what? Eternally, that ring doesn't mean anything. It's all about their relationship with Jesus.
How much of a struggle was it for you? Because you said you became a believer in Jesus when you were 8. So was there ever that struggle, that sort of tug, if you will? I know I experienced that when I was at ESPN. I'm curious for you if you ever experienced that sort of identity struggle of your identity being found in your work and being known as Ted Barrett, the umpire. It's how I'm introducing you on this podcast versus Ted Barrett, the follower of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when I got to the big leagues, because I looked up to major league umpires so much. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be them. And so when I got to the big leagues, I wanted to be accepted by them. I wanted to be loved by them. I wanted them to say, you're one of us. And so many times I wouldn't take my stand for God when I needed to. I would kind of shrink back. God showed me that you got to go all in. You're either going to follow me or you're not. You can't have one foot in the umpire world and one foot in my world. It's got to be all me. And, it's something I wrestled with. And the other thing is I felt God calling me toward ministry. And so as I went through the minor leagues, I thought here was my deal with him. I said, okay, God, I'm going to try this umpiring thing. If this doesn't work out, I'll go into ministry. And, we make these deals with God, and he just sits up there and laughs. And
Right. Yep.
he kept calling me, and I got to the big leagues, and I said, okay, this is what he wanted for me. And then he kept calling me to the ministry, and I said, God, this is crazy. I made it to the big leagues, and now you're calling me out. And, there's this wrestling match going on until finally I surrendered. I said, all right, God, you win. I'll do whatever you want. I will go be a missionary. I hope you make it Hawaii, not Africa, because, that'd be cool. And I'll go preach, even though I don't want to do that. I'll do whatever you want. And I'll leave umpiring. And I finally just surrendered that to him on my knees. And then God said, he has to smack me sometimes. And he said, no, I put you as an umpire for a reason. I want you in ministry, but as an umpire. And so that was something that took me years to figure out. But finally, when he did, and then I said, okay, let's do it. I have no idea how or what that even looks like or what that means. And that's kind of where the journey began with our ministry, Calling for Christ. Another umpire, Rob Drake, he was a minor league umpire at the time. He's a major league umpire now. We went to a retreat for the players, UPI, which is a great supporter of ours and a great baseball ministry. We went to one of their retreats and we got a lot out of it, but we said, we can't have players with umpires at a retreat. It didn't seem natural. We're kind of cats and dogs, even though we're brothers in Christ. We have different issues. And so we said, we've got to start our own retreat for umpires. And we did. And we just kind of sent out some emails. We had a pastor help us. We got a property up in Oklahoma at the time. And, I thought we'd get some major league guys to show up. We had 12 low-level rookie ball guys. I was the only big league guy there, so I thought that was a flop. But what God was doing was building this ministry up from the ground up. And so out of those 12 low-level A-ball guys, 4 of them are major league umpires now, and they're part of our leadership team. And this last retreat, we had 51 active umpires. If you think about it, there's only 76 major league umpires and about 250 minor league umpires. So to have 50 guys out of that is a huge, huge chunk. And we've got about 15 of the 76 major league guys are locked in, part of our, have completed our discipleship program, are locked in followers of Jesus. Several more are part of our weekly prayer calls. And everybody on the staff, whether they participated in it or not, are appreciative of what we do. So it's God took me and some other guys that had no idea what we were doing and created a tremendous ministry out of it.
That is awesome. I love hearing that. We are talking to Ted Barrett, Major League Baseball umpire and crew chief. We're going to end it with a couple more questions here, Ted. First of all, I read that you're an ordained minister and that you recently completed your doctorate in theology. So you are an umpire, like you said, but you're following God's calling even more deeper. I mean, you're a Reverend, Doctor. What do I even call you? Do I call you Rev or Doc? What do we call you here? Because it looks like God has really got you in a unique position here.
Well, for me, I just feel like the more I started studying the Bible, the more I learned how much I don't know. And it's just so deep and it's so rich. And I wanted to learn all I could. And to get some formal theological training was my desire. And, it's humbling because I was in there with people that were in full-time ministry in churches. And I was kind of the dunce, the guy with the dunce cap in the corner. But also I was okay with that. I was just like, teach me. And I'd be the guy, after I would ask the teacher, what does this mean? What does this mean? I didn't want to stop the class and slow down, but I had some great instructors that were patient with me, that would point out, give me great stuff to read. I became a reader, which I wasn't. And I just began to learn and grow. And I just, again, I'm here to tell you that, here I have my PhD and I just feel like I'm scratching the surface of God's word. It's just so rich. And yet, a first-time person can pick up the Bible and get so much out of it too. So I just want to encourage people to continue reading, to continue growing. We are so lucky to live in an age where we've got, on the computer, we've got access to all these great teachers and writers and preachers and pastors, and I'm still kind of an old school guy. I like to hold the book in my hand, but the other guys, they get on with their Kindles and their reading devices. And that is, you asked me earlier about the downtime. You can fill it with good stuff, you can fill it with bad stuff, and I choose to read and learn. And so one thing I want to encourage people with, and I talk to men's groups a lot, and so I want you to know that whatever job you're doing, for me it's an umpire, or if the guy, my dad was a welder, and my mom was a nurse, and wherever God has you, he's placed you there strategically because he wants you to reach the people around you. And so a lot of people think, well, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I'm not a minister. You are in full-time ministry as a follower of Jesus, whatever job you're in. And so I just encourage guys to learn all they can and to just let God use them.
Before I ask my last question, I just want to make reference. You mentioned it earlier, and I had it down as something I wanted to get to. We don't have a lot of time, but tell me about your son kind of following in your footsteps as an umpire. That must be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm very proud of him. Again, he wanted to go to umpire school when he was younger. He played baseball and kind of grew up around the umpiring. And I wouldn't let him. I said he had to go to college, but he chose to go in the military. He did 4 years in the Air Force. I'm proud of him. I have another son in the Army right now. But when Andrew got out of the Air Force, he went to umpire school. He's worked his way up to the Midwest League now. He was just assigned to work the All-Star game. So he had the plate in the Midwest League All-Star game 2 nights ago, and I got to watch him, and he did a great job. And I'm just very proud of him. But more so, I'm proud of him as a follower of Jesus, and just excited to see what God's going to do in his life, whether it's in umpiring or whatever he does, and just watching him serve and follow Jesus. So, as you say, following my footsteps, yes, but more importantly, he's following in the footsteps of our master, Jesus.
That's awesome. So the last question we ask on the podcast, Ted, we ask this to all of our guests, and it's an easy question, but it's not sometimes an easy answer. What is God teaching you right now?
Oh man, God is, I was sharing with the guys, he is stripping me of everything. He is stripping me of my pride. He is stripping me of my ego, and he is stripping me of any desire for earthly things and achievements and accomplishments. And he is making me just solely concentrate on him. Like I said before, we're lucky in the major leagues where we make a decent living. And God is showing me that any material possessions, anything we accumulate, it doesn't mean anything. And it's all about Jesus. And, he's got me looking toward eternity, toward heaven. And like the Israelites who wandered in the desert for 40 years before entering the promised land, I feel like we're just wandering on this earth through the desert until we get to heaven. And so all this stuff that we get so excited about, so bogged down with, really, at the end of the day, it's not going to mean anything when we worship with Jesus in heaven. That's the ultimate thing. And so I hope that makes sense, but that's what God's been teaching me.
He is Ted Barrett, Major League Baseball umpire, full-time since 1999, and the co-founder of Calling for Christ Ministry. Ted, how can people get in touch with you as far as the ministry, Calling for Christ Ministry? What's the website there?
The website's callingforchrist.com. They could send us a message there and get in touch with us. We're pretty good about checking emails and getting back. Any way they want to get involved or support, we're open to that. But more importantly, if there's a way we can help people or pray for them, please just get in touch with us there at callingforchrist.com.
Awesome. Ted, thank you so much for being a part of the Sports Spectrum podcast. We really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, I'm humbled and honored that you would have me on and let me speak. And so I just want to encourage people too that they could really help us by praying. Number one, praying for umpires. I ask people to pray for me. If you happen to see me on TV, pray for me. If I make a call you don't like, instead of getting mad at me, I just ask you to pray for me. That would be great too.
Absolutely. Ted, thank you.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Wow, Ted Barrett, I really enjoyed listening to his story and hearing him tell us about his journey, his faith journey in Christ, and just the peek behind the curtain that is being a Major League Baseball umpire. Fascinating to me, fascinating. And we welcome in, as we always do, Raymond St. Martin, Director of Digital and Media for Sports Spectrum and The Increase. And Raymond, I just thought Ted's story was one that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to just really what this life is like to be a full-time Major League Baseball umpire.
Yeah, Jason. I mean, sometimes I'm surprised by our guests and just the stories that they bring. And sometimes I want to listen to a faith perspective that they share, and other times it's just an inside look at what it's like to do their job, every day. And Ted Barrett's ability to communicate what it takes to do this position, and just his honesty and his transparency with sharing the story of being a minor league umpire, how it takes 10 years to get there, how to get to the major leagues, if you even make it, how you have to spend time at every single level, how you have to drive your car from place to place, and how you have to stay in the worst hotels. And then guess what? You've made it. You get to be on a 3-day travel schedule.
Yeah, I know.
You're like, I don't know how many people are listening to this out there that have yelled at the TV or cursed at an umpire and had to ask for forgiveness, or have thought they could do that job. That's one of those jobs like, I don't have to hit the ball going 95 miles an hour, and I don't have to throw a 12-6 curveball. I don't have to run like a deer. I just have to be able to call balls and strikes and say if you're out or safe. I mean, how hard is that?
Anybody could do that, right?
Anybody. In fact, I think all of us do, but we do it from the comfort of our home, or from a seat that we paid for, or if we're in, if our children are playing high school sports or they're playing Little League, we're doing it from the stands. We're not getting in the crouch, getting dirty, and dedicating our time, and then we're going to make mistakes. I was a minor league. I mean, I was a Little League umpire when my son was in Little League, and man, the parents behind you yelling in your ear, the other coaches coming at you and yelling at you, and you're like, dude, I don't get paid for this. Like, I think it was a strike. It looked like a strike to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had the same experience both in Little League softball with my daughter and in Upward basketball. We have an Upward basketball program, a Christian basketball kids league here at our church. And I noticed I said a Christian kids basketball league, and we're refereeing these games, these 4th and 5th and 6th grade games, and running up and down the court. And we might call a travel, and you hear a couple parents like, that's not a travel. He took 2 steps. And I'm like, wait a minute, remember, we're supposed to be examples to these kids and Christ-like, and we're screaming at a referee for making a call on a 5th and 6th grade volunteer basketball. It's just insane. But it really does come back to, no matter how much you know about sports, doing that job is not easy.
It's not. Imagine, trying to be behind the plate for a perfect game.
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. He didn't even realize that he'd umpired a perfect game with David Cohn.
Yeah.
He gets it. He's like, was that a perfect game? Yeah, it was a perfect game.
He's just trying to take literally each call as it comes, each pitch as it comes. It's kind of crazy. I also thought, Raymond, that his stuff on his faith journey in the Lord with Jesus and his struggle with identity was really powerful. What did you think of his story there of the 2007 World Series?
I thought it was. I think it's a common story amongst athletes or people once they've reached the top of their profession to look around and say, is that it? These temporal things on the earth, is that it? You reach success, you feel there's like this feeling of joy that comes over you. There's this feeling of elation, but then there's a feeling of, what else? And then you look around the earth and you're like, thank you, Jesus, that this isn't it.
Yeah.
Thank you, God, for creating me and for making me and for making this earth that I might experience it while I'm here, but I can really see the ceiling. I can see the highest level of what we can do here on earth as a human being with no connection to Jesus. And I feel like you and I were talking off the air, just it really makes me realize like how different temporal is to eternal, and how I don't know that we'll be dissatisfied when we're in heaven, but I don't think we'll ever be unsatisfied.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
If that makes sense. As we're searching the eternal, it's like somewhere along that path line of getting to know Jesus and growing in our faith, we realize that we're just starting.
Well, it's an unseen thing that is hard for us to grasp because we're in this earth that we live in. the Bible says, fix your eyes on things that are unseen. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And it's like we don't understand or see or know except for what the Bible says about what this eternal life is going to bring us. So that is hard for a lot of people, and I've struggled with this too, of course, to grasp what is next. That hug and kiss that I get each day from my daughter, like I think about, how can it actually get any better than that true love of when your daughter is just there with you, or when your wife is unconditionally loving you? How can that truly be better? Because we're so focused on the earth. And then you look at what Jesus promises, and it's like you can't even fathom how amazing it's going to be when you go into eternal life.
And then when you realize that they're not your kids anyway, Sarah's not your daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, you add all of those things up, and then you realize, like, wow, like, I'm loving her because she's his. She's loving me because I'm his. We're connected because we're his. That's why we're able to even feel this love now, is because he's given it to us.
Yeah, we love because he first loved us. That's what the Bible says.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Raymond, thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon, and thank you guys for listening here to the Sports Spectrum podcast. As always, you can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum, or you can check us out on Facebook as well, or everything Sports Spectrum related is at sportspectrum.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on the Sports Spectrum podcast.